Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I am Jason Mutation Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson. Welcome to your Mind University, because you have stumbled onto the podcast where we take one character construct or incredibly complicated genetic theory and teach you everything you need to know about it in about an hour, except today, because this is the third installment in our Summer Movie Club series.
That is correct. Today we are talking about a movie that came out in 2000. It's the third movie in our Summer Movie Club, and that movie is called Old X-Men. Not Old X-Men, but just X-Men. The one that doesn't have any weird subtitles, the one that it's not called X2 or X3 or X First Class, just plain old boring X-Men. And we have a very special guest with us here today. Ashley, would you like to introduce them?
Oh, well, we have an incredible actor, stuntman, nerd, known for Jarhead, Captain America, Civil War. He's Goldface on The Flash, and Thanos, the OG Thanos in Avengers. We have Mr. Damion Poitier joining us today. Finally!
Welcome to the show, Damion.
Thank you. You guys have been trying to get me on forever, so I appreciate your patience and being like, hey, look. You need to come on our show. And I'm like, I do. And I'm like, ooh.
Well,
so today worked out, and I'm super happy for it.
I imagine the scheduling with the Mad Titan is always complicated, so we appreciate your time.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky. So how you guys doing with all the craziness going on?
You know, it's funny. Like, that's one of the best things I think about doing. This is the third sort of like revisiting a movie that's celebrating like an anniversary, and I will say revisiting older movies that we either passionately like or passionately dislike has been helping.
It's been interesting, and it's been a good opportunity outside of the nerd realm to binge all things comics, TV, movies that we've been looking forward to. So trying to focus on the blessings of this weird time, instead of the complications. I would imagine you have a bunch of projects that are now on pause or on hold until such a time as you can terrorize people again.
Trying to reconfigure how things are done is very tricky like this, and it's been interesting and just kind of taking in what's going on. There's a whole lot of like, I don't know about you guys, but it's just been exhausting.
Yes.
just like, I'm like, why am I this tired? There's no, and it's just trying to keep up on it. It's been tricky, but we're doing all right. I always, when people ask me how I'm doing, I say surprisingly well.
Yes. Yes, in the situation. All right, so let's talk about X-Men 2000 by hopping into the first section of our podcast, the 10-cent origin. Ashley, would you like to explain to Mr. Damion and our listeners what that is?
The 10-cent origin is where we tell you all the who's-its and what's-its galores about X-Men 2000 in case you ever go to a mutant-themed cocktail party and someone has never seen this movie.
That's correct. This movie was directed by Bryan Singer. It was produced by Laura Schuler Donner and Ralph Winter. It was a screenplay by David Hayter with many uncredited rewrites, including Joss Whedon and Mission Impossible's Ralph McQuarrie did a rewrite on this draft. Story was by Tom DeSanto and Bryan Singer. It was a release date of July 12th, 2000. It is officially 20 years old. It can almost drink.
In this country.
Yes, that's correct. Has a running time 104 minutes. And of course, the budget was $75 million with the box office profit of $296.3 million. And the synopsis is, in a world filled with hate and prejudice, those who are feared by those who cannot accept their differences. Led by Xavier, the X-Men fight to protect a world that fears them. They are locked in a battle with a former colleague and friend, Magneto, who believes humans and mutants should never coexist. That is a terrible synopsis, I believe.
That is an awful
That's from IMDb.
Synopsis.
And from this point forward, there will be full spoilers in this movie. So if by some chance you've never seen this movie, which I think is crazy at this point, full spoilers.
Also, right now,
if you don't want to see it,
which we're going to get to.
That's true. If anyone is watching this live or is listening anywhere in the near future, hello, future people, this is currently streaming on HBO for free right now.
Yes, it is.
It's pretty easy to find.
Very quickly, I want to point out Dylan Hernandez gave us a super sticker, which is very nice of Dylan Hernandez. And everybody else out there, we will have a Q&A section at the very end. But if you cannot wait till then, we do have super chats open, so you can hop to the beginning of the line. I mean, I honestly would be jonesing to ask Damion quite a few questions that have nothing to do with X-Men at all. But that's just all right. Let's move into the meet cute section of our podcast. Ashley, what is that?
That is where we stole a term for romantic comedy writing, and we tell you where we first met X-Men and how cute it was.
Damion, since you are our guest, when was the first time you saw this movie? And just right out the gate, what were some of your initial thoughts?
So I actually saw this movie in right after. I think I might have been there opening weekend. I think I was there opening weekend because I was incredibly excited about it, and I was incredibly disappointed by it.
Hot takes.
We'll get to that hot take.
Yeah, it's a great movie. It's not a good X-Men movie.
And I'm excited to dive into that. Now, Ashley, where was the first time you saw this movie?
So if people listen to our Batman Begins episode, this is going to sound very, very similar. I was but a very young child when this came out and had no idea that it existed.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see X-Men until I saw the trailer for X2, not knowing that there was an X-Men, and Nightcrawler was in the trailer. And Nightcrawler, as my Jason Inman drawn shirt illustrates, is my favorite X person. And I was like, I didn't know there was one before. I guess I have to watch it now. And I was bummed that Nightcrawler wasn't in the first one. So there's my hot take on X-Men. Jason.
Yes.
Where did you first meet cute X-Men 2000?
I saw this, I believe as well, opening weekend. And I saw this in a very tiny 2-screen theater in little nowhere Iola, Kansas, which is a town that you could learn about if you bothered to Google it. But otherwise, there's not much to worry about. But that's where I remember walking into this movie thinking there was no way Hollywood could pull off an X-Men movie. Like, it was just impossible. And I remember walking out of this movie being very pleasantly surprised that this movie is comprehensible.
Pulled off a mutant movie.
Yes.
With X-Men characteristics somewhere in there.
All right, so let's
be so fun.
Let's just hop into this movie, working through it. The intro of this movie is very interesting. We start with an intro, like fancy music, 2000s age graphics, and always a monologue by whoever's playing Professor X in the movie. And this is a trope that follows it through. But this is the one where I think it's probably the best one. It's like mutation. There's a key to evolution. You know, I don't know why I sounded very Liverpoolian there. But Damion, what do you think about this intro? Because again, yeah, like this kind of sets the tone for every X-Men movie that we're going to see for the next 20 years. I initially like kind of enjoyed it because I kind of felt that this was Bryan Singer / whoever's thought this or idea this was sort of doing their version of the Star Wars crawl.
It was absolutely the Star Wars crawl. It was absolutely and it felt. I like that. It didn't assume that the audience knew who these characters were and what they were about. So I like that, and I like that it kind of gave you it's a little pre-primer to what you're about to see. It's like, okay, look, we got another, separate group, and this group actually has powers, and that's why people don't like them, and yada yada. So I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought that it was a good way to kind of get people into, okay, what's this about, and had a very science fiction-y kind of feel to it as opposed to a superhero-y feel, which I know, it was very, so it kind of, I liked it.
Something, Damion, we forgot to ask you, Damion, about in your Meet Cute is what is your bona fides when it comes to X-Men? Now, this is something I want to know.
I've been reading X-Men for years.
Yeah.
Like very, very many years. Between myself and my father, I've been reading, I think I don't even know how far back I go, but I've read a lot of X-Men comics. So I'm very familiar with the different characters, the relationships, why they work, why they didn't, why they were set up the way they were set up, which is why I have.
Who's your favorite X-Men or X-person?
Oh, we should do that with all three of us.
Yeah.
Mine's Nightcrawler. I already said that.
Yep. I'm going to go ahead and assume you're a Cable guy.
I am a Cyclops. I'm a Scott. I am anything the Summers family. But this is a Cable T-shirt I'm wearing. Yes.
Summers family in general.
Yeah.
Favorite X-Men. That's I vary with my favorites depending on what I'm going through. I mean, I cut my teeth on Patch, Wolverine's Patch. So that was one of the first ones handed to me. So that was kind of, but We're gonna come back to that. We're gonna come back.
Okay. If they appear in this movie, please let us know.
Huge Nightcrawler.
Yes.
Now, Ashley, I want to ask you. This movie, also besides doing this like sort of Star Wars crawl thing, this sort of, I mean, you got to give all credit to Blade in 1998, 97, I believe. I can't remember what year, for really kicking off the 98. Thank you, Damion. The true Marvel cinematic. But this is the second one. Like, this is the one that I think like broke big.
I think you have to go Blade, X-Men, and Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. I think you can lay a lot of the credit for everything that comes after that at the feet of those three movies.
Now, it's very interesting because, again, this is number 2 in that trilogy of the foundation of like basically leading us to the MCU. And the opening scene in this is a concentration camp scene in Poland, 1944, which I don't think anybody was ever expecting to be the opening of an X-Men movie. Is that effective? And the rewatch, do you think that was a great choice? By the way, they filmed that in an alleyway in Toronto. It is literally
it's a reshoot, I believe.
It's a reshoot that they added at the very when they did an initial edit of this movie. They were like, something's missing. And they went back and refilmed it.
And they said it's genocide. That's what we need more of.
You need to give the best villains have recognizable motivations. So you really had to put, power to Magneto's feelings that this is not going to work. Because Magneto has become the point where he thinks humans are Nazis and the X-Men are Jewish and they have power. So he's like, we can't live with them. They're Nazis. So we got to take them all out. So it really makes it brings it home in a way that I think if you didn't have that, you wouldn't nearly have the potential sympathetic reaction to Magneto's plight or his feelings or his extremism.
I also think some of the things that all three of us are going to push against in this movie were choices that were made to ease the general quote unquote audience into the idea of a genre film like this. They were trying to win over my mom. They didn't. She does not like X-Men. But by opening with a scene in what I assume is supposed to be Auschwitz, although they don't specify the camp.
That's what I assumed as well.
In this film version. It shows us that, like, and this is immediately post Schindler's List, right? Which was a lauded film. So, like, we are filmic, we are cinematic, we are dealing with real world event. They're trying to earn what happens when a toad gets struck by lightning, the same thing that happens, everything else is coming in about an hour from this time. And I think this is a very effective moment. Yeah. And the quality of that line, subject for certain.
The only line of Joss Whedon's that made it into the final cut.
Not everyone can hit them all out of the park. It's okay. I would love to get a line in X-Men.
Age of Ultron.
But this sequence is so effective, they aped it in your favorite X-Men movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say it. Like, this opening sequence of Eric, the way you stated, Damion, like sets up all the stakes for Magneto throughout this whole movie, but it's so impactful, and I think it just goes to show you that 20 years later, I bet you if you ask people how does this movie begin, I think they would all tell you it starts in a concentration camp, and it was so powerful that X-Men First Class, when they decided to reboot this series, they were like, you know how we're going to reboot this? With the exact same scene that started off this franchise. And we're going to film it exactly the same way. And Matthew Vaughn in First Class, I think, does such a good job. And you don't even realize that you're watching brand new scenes until they do those cutaways to Kevin Bacon watching it happen.
Well,
which
also,
is just like, whoa.
The kid looks radically different.
He does, but they find a kid that looks just enough like it.
Sure.
I remember seeing X-Men First Class the first time in theaters in 2011 and being like, are we watching? Did they just use the same footage? Yeah.
Which honestly would have been cheaper if we're going to be honest.
I mean, I'm surprised they didn't use the same footage. Yeah. So, again, there's a lot of setup in it. We have the setup with Auschwitz or Poland, wherever you want to call it. We have the setup with the scene in Washington, D.C. And then we have the setup with one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie, the confrontation between Xavier and Magneto in that hallway, which is filled with beautiful cinematography. Newton Thomas Siegel was the cinematographer of this movie. I think he lit this scene so brilliantly. And this is, of course, this has been a running joke for Geek History Lesson since our inception. This is the scene where Professor Xavier goes, Magneto's like, what are you looking for, old friend? And he goes, I'm looking for hope. He whispers that line. Patrick Stewart, genius line. Damion, first time you're seeing live action Magneto and live action Professor X on screen talking to each other. What do you think about this scene? Where do you think it comes up short? What are your thoughts on this scene, sir?
Stewart killed it. he's the epitome of what I thought about when I saw Professor Xavier. So he absolutely killed it. And Sir Ian McKellen did an excellent job, but when they cast him, they missed something very important to the core of Magneto's character, which is Magneto is physiologically opposite of Professor Xavier. Xavier's in a chair and incapable. Magneto is supposed to be this large, imposing physical figure. So McKellen did an excellent job, but he just isn't a large, imposing physical figure. So whereas he carried the heck out of the character, there was a stronger disparity between the two that they completely failed to illustrate here, which it just changes the tone of who they are. You know,
part of that too might have been how the age that they were casting. Like, if you were doing that now, you'd cast Stephen Lang, right? Because he's older and he's big and he's tough. And
well, I don't know if you cast Lang though, because I mean, McKellen's performance was incredible. Once again, I'm not taking away from his performance at all. In terms of an acting decision, I absolutely understand the McKellen choice. But in terms of the I went from being the victim to the bully. You know what I mean? There's a physiological aspect to Magneto, to Eric Lynch here, that you don't see here.
Well, Damion, let me ask you this question. They went through so many different casting choices for this movie. Rutger Hauer was what I heard. Is he who you would want to cast?
Hauer is my Magneto.
Oh, okay. I want to hear your thoughts. Like, because Terrence Stamp was considered like General Zod, which I think would have been a very interesting choice. But apparently they went through like so many people.
I want Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer, 2000s Rutger Hauer. I think he would have been a very good Magneto.
Who would later go on to appear in Batman
Begins. Yeah.
Clean him up, put him in the gym. This is before they really started doing those transformations. Yes. But
go ahead.
If you had cleaned him up, put him in the gym, and Rutger Hauer, his look, he's got a very stark kind of. I mean, it's Rutger Hauer. That kind of physiological feel to him. You've got Blade Runner to lean back on, so you already have that feeling of him as a physically powerful character. He's got a very, very, I mean, just the color of his eyes is very inherently frightening. That such pale eyes, and especially if he's angry with you and being an extremist. You can see Rutger Hauer doing horrible things, and I don't know that he would have been a sympathetic Magneto as Ian McKellen was. But he would have certainly been a very, very imposing and powerful, frightening Magneto.
Well, you bring up something really interesting that Jason and I always talk about when we talk about this movie in X2. And it's that everyone's body as a superhero is very different here than it is now. Now you have to have like The Rock. I haven't had a drink of water for 3 days before I shot this scene with my shirt off.
You got to look like Damion here.
I mean, truly. There's a reason why he's all over the MCU.
Look, there's a reason we invited Damion on this podcast. He has the body of a god, and he could kill us with a snap of his fingers.
Exactly. But even when you see Hugh Jackman, who is like, look, more fit than I'm ever going to be, and truly looks incredible, he's not cut the way he is as a later Wolverine. Like there's a shot of his stomach, which, like, again, I'd love for my stomach to be that flat, but he doesn't have a six-pack. And I was like, well, I didn't know that Wolverine didn't have a six-pack in the first X-Men movie, but it makes Wolverine in a lot of ways more human than later on, even in like Days of Future Past, where you can see the veins in his neck standing out when he goes and when he's sent back into the past.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shocker to go back and watch and see Hugh Jackman shape then as opposed to Hugh Jackman shape in later movies. I was like, whoa! I didn't realize that he wasn't, that he didn't bulk up. I mean, he got, fit.
Oh, for
he
sure.
wasn't bulky. Yeah, he didn't get, superhero cut rip, which I was like, oh my god, I didn't really realize that. You don't remember that until you go back and watch it again. So once again, they were really, and this is a time where they still hadn't, like I said, they weren't putting people in the gym and doing these 6-week workout programs and things like that. Which I think, Spartacus, well, Matrix obviously was the beginning of that. Spartacus really played into it because they were going to have their clothes off all the time. But but it was kind of a thing before that had happened. So they didn't really think about the fact that you can take a normal looking dude and transform him into a godlike figure. That just hadn't hit the zeitgeist in terms of superhero filmmaking yet.
Well, Damion, let me ask you, as somebody who has gone through that sort of like God makeover in terms of body and stuff like that, do you think it's necessary for superhero films like now? Do you think you absolutely have to do it, or are we past that point now?
Depends on the character.
Okay.
It really depends on the character and the physicality of the character and where the physicality comes from. You know, so certain characters, like, for example, and I know, you know, Batman, he works out all the time. He should be shredded. He should be ripped. He should be stupidly fit. Characters with powers who don't necessarily have physiological powers characters who don't have physiological powers don't necessarily need to be super ripped. But in terms of, this is our modern mythology and these are our gods, it makes sense to make the characters that we're going to be looking up to look up toable. You know, so there's going to be certain characters that you can get away with it, but for the most part, I feel like it kind of makes sense, and especially, you know, now that we're much closer to comic book actual, they're all ripped. You know, when we do things, we do much closer to what the comic books are. So there's a variety of it really depends on the project and the character.
Well, speaking of characters stuff like that, we have an excellent question here from the super chat. Jason Wells asked, who do you think is the best cast character in this film? Which I think is an interesting question, because this film, we mentioned Patrick Stewart a little bit earlier as Professor X. For years, for the decade before that, I can remember Wizard magazine constantly being like, Patrick Stewart's gonna be Professor X
because they're both bald.
Well, let me ask you, and then Hugh Jackman as Wolverine comes out of nowhere, steals his performance, plays this character. I believe he holds the record, or holds the record, or it's either him or Robert Downey Jr. holding the record for playing the same superhero the most amount of times. Ashley, I'd love to go for you. Who do you think is the best casted character in this film?
So I'm kind of split on the casting. I think the casting is either really good and really inspired, or boy, they were sure famous in 1999, and that's why they got this part.
Gee, what are you talking about?
Look, and that's a huge part of how anything is cast, of course. I think there are some performances that hold up and are more inspired than others. But I actually think a lot of credit is not given to Rebecca Romijn as Mystique in this. And I know Mystique says almost nothing, but this version of Mystique is iconic, and this really reimagined and reevaluated this character for a cinematic audience. She's so different from the comics. She's so different than what we were used to, even in the X-Men cartoons. And so much of what has happened to Mystique after this came from her performance and her physicality. And she makes these incredible, tiny physical choices because she's a model who knows how to use her body and knows what angles are, that really make this character sinister and fun to watch. Because other than Magneto, and I love Ray Park, and I have respect for Tyler Mane, and what they did in this movie, but like she's the best villain in this movie. So I think not enough credit is given to Rebecca Romijn, actually.
I mean, for me, I'm gonna go with the easy answer. I just think for me, it's Wolverine. I mean, just for myself, like I just could not before this movie. When I read X-Men comic books, like I was reading during Onslaught and Age of Apocalypse, and I liked Wolverine, but I didn't love Wolverine. And then this was the first movie this was the movie that sort of opened me up to the character of Wolverine. And a lot of that to me was this guy that I had never seen before called Hugh Jackman. I think giving a lot of heart to this character, that could have just been a cliche. That could have just been tough guy in a movie. And I felt they gave him quite a bit more. So I know that's the very obvious answer, but that's the one I'm going to go with. Damion, who do you think is the best cast character in this film?
Stewart.
Yeah.
He's the closest to the comic book. He's the closest that we had to comic book actual, on screen, doing what the character in the comic book does, sounding like, you know what I mean? He sounds like what I thought Professor Xavier sounded like. He looks like what I thought Professor Xavier should look like. He just did it.
Do you like that they let him keep the English accent instead of having like a neutral American or like a New York dialect?
There's no reason why Professor Xavier can't have an English accent.
That's
that was a big retcon from this, or sort of, because before that they'd always said that he was like born and raised in Westchester. But you are correct. I mean, they never nailed the nationality, but ever since this movie now, he is British.
Yeah.
Right. Even if you go back to the old video games or anything, he always kind of talked like this. He always had a very
formal,
specific, like timbre and tone to his voice. So it didn't bother me at all, especially like I said, because so many of the other aspects of the character were so, and he's a school professor. I mean, it leans into the stereotype, but a school professor with an English accent in upstate New York. That doesn't really, that's not a big reach in terms of where I'm thinking. Yeah.
Well, let's go to you, Damion, because the next thing I want to talk about, we have to talk about after the introduction of Wolverine is, what do you think about these costumes? The black leather collared up costumes that are, it's funny, Ash and I were talking about this when we watched the movie yesterday. There is, and a lot of people don't realize that in the early 2000s, even late 90s, superhero movies were still trying to get out of the shadow of Batman 1989. And these are black leather suits because it was felt at the time, and I think Spider-Man in 2002 was a big one that pushed us out of this. Anything other than black looks stupid on film, which, as we know now, 20 years later, is just ridiculous.
Poppycock.
Yeah, pish posh. What did you think about these suits? Just note for the record, for all our audio listeners, Damion is shaking his head no.
I'm shaking my head no. I did not like the suits. I like the suits for suits, but they weren't X-Men suits.
Yeah.
They didn't evoke, and the other thing is, one of the reasons why the X-Men wore the bright colors was to kind of disarm people. By wearing bright colors and things like that, it was like, look, we're okay. We're not anything to be feared. Bright primary color says, don't fear me. Black bodysuits say, I'm coming to do something serious.
Yeah, Black Ops, I'm going to snap your neck.
Exactly. Yeah. So for that reason, the costumes didn't appeal to me, and it kind of, like, it just didn't evoke the feeling you wanted that someone who's trying not to be feared would wear.
They say to me,
that's a very fair point, because the X-Men are all about, like, protecting the ones who hate and fear us. So that's another great. For me, I understand on the executive level, like, why they did it.
So why?
But I'm with you, Damion. I have never liked these bodysuits. In fact, I've never liked the costumes in these movies until First Class, because when they wore those yellow and blue bodysuits, I was like, yeah, there it is. Ashley, you were going to say something before.
I was going to say, every time I see their costumes, and I don't hate the costumes. I think they're fine for what they are. They would have been better, I think, with more yellow detailing. I think for me, that would have been like, cool, they look like X-Men costumes. But they just screamed to me like, oh, we just saw The Matrix, and that was cool.
Yeah, it's like The Matrix and Blade. We love them.
Yes.
So we're just like I said, that's not something you wear when you're trying not to be feared or hated. It just isn't.
To be honest with you, because this movie went all black suits, and again, we had Blade and we had Batman, it is a miracle that Spider-Man 2002, he wasn't wearing the black suit.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it wasn't already in the black suit.
Yes. Yeah. Like, movie one, he's wearing the Venom costume.
Like, we'll just skip to the Venom costume.
Yeah, because you
Thanks Sam Raimi for that, or whoever made that decision.
Yeah, whoever made it, because executives were like, "Are we certain red and blue will work?"
Someone pitched it for sure.
The focus groups say that red is aggressive.
We just think that we want to move past Chris Reeves' Superman.
We typically usually do not go into worse on the show, but the question has come up in the super chat, so I'm going to bring it up. Tobias Steinberg said, who was the worst cast character in this movie? Now, this one is tough for me.
Easy for me.
Oh, go ahead, Damion.
Wolverine.
Oh, all right.
Fight.
Damion, I want to hear this. I want to hear this debate. I want to hear this hot take. And
for all the reasons you said.
You might want to log through Twitter after this. I'm just saying.
Okay, first of all, I've worked with Hugh Jackman. I know Hugh Jackman. I love Hugh Jackman. He's not Wolverine. Wolverine is a 5'3", surly, bad-tempered, PSD out, memory wiped veteran. He's not supposed to be this likable, lovable, you know, scampy kind of bad guy, you know, or rogue with a heart of gold. He ends up being it, but he was too nice. I didn't feel like I was immediately drawn to Wolverine, and that's like, I feel like you shouldn't be drawn to Wolverine immediately. I feel like you should have some layers come out before you get it. Making him the central character of this movie, I feel, was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Wolverine's the character that you introduce that seems kind of cool, that then arcs into becoming your favorite character because layers are unveiled. Mm-hmm. He's not the character that opens up the franchise and becomes the lead character.
I agree with you. I think there should have been way more Scott as protagonist.
Completely. Let's look at one of the major themes of what the X-Men was doing. They even put it in there, and I don't know why they bothered. The love triangle.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, you look at Hugh Jackman, you look at Scott Summers, you look at Jean Grey, and you're like, why isn't she just leaving Scott? Why isn't she leaving Surfer Boy? And I know James. And James is the homie. James is awesome. He did a great job of what they gave him, but they nerfed his character completely to make Wolverine the hero, which he shouldn't have been.
I agree with you. That this is one of the faults of this movie, is that this is not a team movie. Mm-hmm. It really is Wolverine's movie more than and that's a problem.
So is X2.
Well, and X3. That's a problem with the other
X3
movies in this trilogy.
Exist.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't now if you follow. But that's another problem, is that X-Men Days of Future Past is a Wolverine movie. Yeah. It's not.
Yeah, and they threw it completely on his shoulders, which, like I said, that's not Wolverine.
Yep.
If you read the books, that's not. You told you, Patch. One of my first, Wolverine that's not who he is. That character was great, but that's the Wolf or whatever the heck you want. That's not Wolverine. Wolverine is short. Hugh Jackman is. I look Hugh Jackman in the eyes. I look like maybe a half inch down when I look at Hugh Jackman. He looks and has the bearing of a hero.
For the record, what's your height, sir?
I'm 6'4".
He's 100 feet tall.
6'3". Yes. You know, he's a full foot taller than the character's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Ashley, what would be your answer for this question?
So a lot of my answer to this question has to do with the absolutely tragic and deplorable way in which this character was written. Because I also think that this character is very impactful. This person was very trendy when they were cast. I don't like Storm in this movie. And I kind of come into the Damion argument. She's not Storm. I don't know what this half measure of an accent is. I can't believe that she's not an elder statesman. Like, you had enough. I know Angela Bassett was considered for the role and turned it down, but like, that would have been iconic and amazing. I wanted her to have a maturity and a presence that the character didn't have. She also doesn't say. She's in fully 4 scenes before she speaks. Yep. She speaks her first line is one line in an entire scene, 45 minutes, and like, they do this movie just Storm's so dirty. And Storm is incredible.
I agree. That would be my answer.
They put Storm in there for color.
Yes. And at least we have one whole person of color in this movie, because it could have been none. But
I mean, that's true. But yeah, it is like, that was the biggest thing we noticed in the rewatch. And it's funny because when you look at this movie from a 2000s perspective, the two biggest actors, just in terms of star power in this movie, are Halle Berry and Patrick Stewart. Yeah. Halle Berry should be the lead of this Storm. This actually should probably be Storm's movie, and
not Wolverine's movie. And they put her in that horrible plastic wig that's about to melt.
Be the original group. The original group.
I knew that was going to fire you.
Everything was there. Everything worked. You don't have to put any extra. You don't have to gild the lily or twist things up or give Rogue Jubilee story and then just have Jubilee walk by in the back. You don't have to do that.
Well, you did a perfect thing. You set us up for the next super chat. Adam Grunther says, "What are your thoughts on Anna Paquin as Rogue?" I'll kick this off. When I saw this movie, I thought I liked her because I'd seen her in previous movies. I'd seen her in The Piano. I thought she does a pretty good job. I'm not a huge fan of Rogue in the comic books. So I thought that this movie did a good job of expanding her character and actually personifying, what being a mutant is actually like. I will say on the
what a still frame.
Yep. On the rewatch, yesterday, I didn't like her as much. I find that on each rewatch, I like her less and less. Ashley, how do you feel about Anna Paquin?
I think
Or is it Anna?
I don't know.
No.
I'm gonna say I met her once. She was really lovely.
Oh.
I understand why she was cast. It was like her and Natalie Portman were the it girls of this age at the time. And I think Natalie Portman was already in Star Wars, so she was obviously off the board.
Natalie Portman was actually offered this role, but she turned it down.
I was a little bit younger than them when I saw this movie, so I really loved Rogue the first few times I saw it because Hugh Jackman is very hot, and I was like, I want a hot guy to look after me. That seems great. What's wrong with
I like
that?
a guy with a camper and a trailer.
Yeah,
and he keeps beef jerky in the dash.
You know, I always, you think, if your dad's dead, you don't have daddy issues. But clearly, what I just said is just a whole barrel of daddy issues. But when we watched it yesterday, she makes a choice, and I admire that she's a young actress who committed to a choice. She kind of talks like this, and it's a little bit of a Disney princess voice, and I think it's because Rogue is shy and she's closed off, and we're building to what's going to be her relationship with Bobby. But
all you got to do is look at that freeze frame I keep putting up on screen.
I didn't love that choice, but that's also like me as an adult now looking back at this storyline as opposed to when I was a teen and I first saw it. I think overall, I think she does a fine job. And I think it's a bummer that she really gets put on the back burner. This is kind of the most Rogue has to do for the rest of her foray with this X-Men franchise.
They basically throw that character away. Even in X2. They give her
the cool hair, and then they say goodbye.
They basically just toss that character away. But I will say that like one of the things I do like in this movie, and it is a twist, is that I never thought I would like a relationship between Wolverine and Rogue, and I understand. I kind of like that they made that the foundation. And Damion, that is a very fair point that you said that could have just as easily as been Jubilee. You know,
well, how did Magneto's powers power the machine? How?
I have no idea.
I also have a question at the end when he's giving her power and how she closes her hand. He's not a telepath. He's
okay. Let's save that because we're gonna talk about this. Is actually one of the things. Real quick, I want to throw out thank you to Van F108 for that super chat over here. Let's talk about. First off, I want to know, Damion, did you know that Ian McKellen, Professor X, Patrick Stewart, didn't not know each other before this movie?
I didn't.
This is the movie that they met on. Mm-hmm. This is the movie that
like besties now.
Yes, this is the movie that created. So before this movie, I wanted to just bring this up because this was a fun piece of trivia that I think a lot of people don't know, is that they always knew of each other before this movie. Right. But it's because of this movie and everybody else, they said they were like, we were the two elder statesmen of this movie, and everybody else would go out to the bars and party. We would just go back to our hotel rooms and drink tea. And so because of that, this is the movie that made them be best friends. Right. Yeah, awesome. Which I think is very interesting. Now, let's use that segue into talking about Magneto's plan. So Magneto's plan is, I'm going to kidnap Senator Kelly, which, okay, I like the deep cut of pulling in Senator Kelly. Cool with that. But Magneto's plan is I'm going to make a machine that's going to turn everyone in the world into a mutant, not a naturally occurring mutant, because that's what I am, into a synthetic mutant. And because of all the world's leaders being mutants, we're all okay. We're safe.
It's the opposite of the Cure storyline.
Yes.
Like in every way.
Yes. Damion, I know you're a big fan of this plot line, right?
Oh my God! I will tell you, it set me a tingle.
Well, see, to me, this is the Magneto's mutation machine is the part of this movie where I'm like, oh boy, this is where Hollywood is like, we know the better storyline. This is what we're gonna do. Because like it all devolves into this. We have to stop Magneto from basically pushing the button on the bomb, on the genetic mutation bomb, basically. But
it's also not enough to just have the X-Men fight the Brotherhood, which is such the obvious first movie, especially we're trying to bring this to quote unquote street level. We're trying to make this comprehensible. We're making it for like all the non-nerds out there. It's So it's like, just line up 5 people on each side and say, let them fight. But
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, because to me, this definitely stands out. Like, to me, I can just feel like this is an executive note. When they turned in the first script and it was just the X-Men fighting the Brotherhood, they were like, and protecting humans at like some event, they were like, this isn't strong enough. Can it be something that like threatens the whole world?
Right.
Because
this is definitely the giant spider at the end of Super.
Yeah.
That ended up in Wild Wild West.
Yes,
and also ended up in Man of Steel. That world engine
it
kind of
did.
looks
It
like a
did end
spider.
up in Man of Steel. But yeah, this is the part of and you are correct. Like we jump ahead to the finale of this movie. Yeah, just because Magneto transfers his powers to Rogue doesn't mean that she's gonna still touch the machine and
Right.
and then also, yeah, how does magnetism mutate the world? It does not make sense.
They said radioactivity, and then all of a sudden there's magnet. I'm like, you could have made that. See, that's my issue. You could have made that any mutant. It didn't have to be Rogue. It could have been Jubilee. Jubilee shoots out those sparks. Maybe the radioactive signature of those sparks run through the magnetron, create the same type of thing that mutates humans. Magneto discovered it by accident because he dropped a magnetron rock in his, whatever. And I mean, there was no logical reason for that other than they were trying to force things into a place that they didn't need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Like, did need to be, and then but the problem is they shifted so many relationships that were strong, powerful relationships that carried on through all the movies that they didn't justify the switching.
Yes,
they didn't justify why Wolverine was a hero. Hugh Jackman was a great hero. He wasn't Wolverine. They didn't justify why Scott was relegated to the background. They didn't justify why Storm was there at all.
Yeah.
No reason to be there. Other than
at the end, when they fly Wolverine up to go and save Rogue,
I don't know if I can do it.
Conveniently forgetting. Yeah, and I was like, why doesn't Storm can fly?
Yeah, I actually said I said that when we watched the movie. I was like, why doesn't Storm fly up there? She can fly.
Halle Berry was like, I'm not getting in a rig. Absolutely not. No, ma'am.
She threw herself up an elevator shaft.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. She threw herself up an elevator without getting banged off the sides. If you can do that, you can put Hugh Jackman on top of that thing.
Speaking of that, Meow Nyan sent a super chat that says, "You know what happens when a toad gets hit by lightning? Is this movie's Ever Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight? I still don't get it. Thanks." My Meow, I thank you for the super chat. I would say that this is actually this movie's "You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts," because that is a scene in Batman '89 that has never made sense.
I mean,
the thing is though, the Joker doesn't make sense. So Ever Dance with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight kind of is like, yeah, it makes sense. He's the Joker. Sure. I can let that one go a little more than. And the problem with the Toad line was actually that like there was nothing. There was no inflection change. There was no, like, you could tell Halle Berry was over it by the time they gave her that line. She was just like, I don't have anything to do in this movie. You guys, you want me to say this? Like, there was just nothing given to that line to try to, because Ice Skate Uphill was horrible.
Yeah.
But it worked. It was like, I don't know why. I was just like, Okay. Oh, cool.
I also don't understand why Ray Park was, of all the mutants he could have been, we made him Toad.
Again, really weird casting choices.
And I think he's great. And he probably could have been a pretty neat Gambit because he's great with the staff.
Well, there was a rumor for a long, long time in the early 2000s, and I wish this would have happened, that they were going to cast Ray Park as Iron Fist. And to me, I'm been like,
they could cast as Iron Fist now, I'd be down.
Exactly, right? But I think, again, and there was a time where Ray Park, because of Phantom Menace, was like the new hotness in Hollywood. So he pops up in a lot of these early 2000s movies, but every time he's always in a role like this where they subjugate him to the background. Like, because again, Toad, like, he gets to do that scene where he spins the bow staff. And
Jason was like, there's his Darth Maul.
Yeah, and he does that little dance, but otherwise they're not really utilizing any of his abilities or his talents.
Yeah, he's like, he spits the thing twice. He uses his tongue.
That was an action figure. Jason told me this. Gene with the spit.
I remember that action figure.
Oh my God. I won't even bother Googling that stupid thing. But the action figures, we do action figure spotlights on this show quite a bit, Damian. Okay. And The action figure spotlight for this one is none of them, because I remember being excited for these action figures, and they were a terrible line of action figures. So I will not even justify them by showing a picture. But that just goes to show you that they were like, another underutilized character is Jean Grey in this movie.
Yeah.
And the best they can do for Jean Grey, who is one of the most powerful characters, is that they're like, we're gonna spit acid in her face so that she's like.
Also, not to go too deep onto it, but to have a male character do that to a powerful female character,
it's like very fair
gross point. On a number of levels as well.
Let's take it even a step further back. She's telekinetic.
Yeah. Yeah, take it off of there.
Oh, look, I caught it like Kylo Ren caught the laser bolt.
Or even just pull it off with your telekinesis when it's on your face. Oh, this is gross. Okay,
now,
it's not on my face anymore.
We have jumped to the end of this movie.
Nothing happens to the. It's Rogue, the train, and the fight.
Well, I want to talk about the train action sequence because for me, I actually think that one of the, I would say, high marks of this movie is this confrontation in the middle of the movie where Magneto shows up. We get the twist that Wolverine is not the person that Magneto's after. It is actually Rogue. And we get this confrontation that really shows you how powerful Professor X is and how powerful Magneto is. Now, the problem with this sequence is that they basically copy this sequence with Magneto in every X-Men movie after this. But the first time you see it, I actually think it's pretty powerful. And here is also why I think we keep jumping to the end and we keep having problems with the end. I think the train sequence and the face-off between Charles and Magneto is the best action sequence in the movie. And so they top themselves an hour into the movie so that when we get to the climax, it's nowhere near as exciting. Damion, what did you think about this standoff with Magneto controlling all the guns, Charles controlling all the people?
So wait, train or train station? Because the train station...
The train station, excuse me.
Because we didn't learn about the Rogue thing until the train.
Mm-hmm.
The train station was where they first faced each other.
Yeah, to me, it's like I'm mashing them all together. But yes, the train station.
Okay, so no, that was good stuff. I mean, it was if Scott's visor comes off, he closes his eyes automatically. He knows to do that. That was silly, but that was just so that Storm didn't have to.
Trailer, Damion, come on.
Yeah, truly.
That was just so that Rogue didn't have to blast through the ceiling to get the lightning in, I guess. Storm didn't have to blast through, but no, the thing with Magneto and I don't know if I can stop all of them, Charles. Amazing. See, and that's where McKellen works for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because he killed. He did such a good job. Like I said, there's just a core aspect of the character for Magneto that was missing. But he did such a great job of being like, look, man. And once again, he had a little too much heart. I felt Magneto. I don't feel like anything until the Magnetron thingy, nothing he said or did was that unreasonable.
Well, that's the interesting thing that I think X-Men could lean into a little more is the bad guys aren't really bad and the good guys aren't really good, because at this point the audience doesn't know that Professor X, if you love him, might accidentally kill you on purpose
or be quite a terrible person
or sacrifice you. But I think the reason
but I just feel like there was a like a kind of a shuffle footing around Magneto's, like his McKellen came off a little too sympathetic for me there.
Interesting.
I think the reason the scene works, though, and the reason that we respond to this more is because of the emotional gravitas. And this is Shakespearean, right? This is two kings.
Oh yeah.
On the eve of war, meeting at the battlefield before their soldiers come out with their first, and these two actors, maybe more than anyone else of their generation, can handle that, even if they're not actually looking at anyone except maybe a tennis ball somewhere.
And the other interesting thing about this scene that I think, and this is another reason why I think this action sequence is so much stronger than the action sequence at the end, is that it is set up by that first conversation at the beginning where these guys know each other, they're friends. And then in this scene, we get to see just how powerful they are, but
each of them,
but
that's the thing.
They will not kill the other.
Right.
They like each other just enough to not kill the other one.
Oh, the brotherly love, which is something that I think in the modern society we don't have enough respect for, like platonic love between two men, is so perfectly illustrated in this scene, but I think in the movie overall between those two characters.
Yeah.
It was yeah, I quite enjoyed, and like I said, the thing was, I'm not sure what about it, like, kind of maybe. I love the sequence, but I guess it's because the relationships were so mishmashed in this, you know, in terms of what X-Men is. That's why it was kind of, it was an incredibly strong and pretty powerful, well played relationship, but something about it didn't quite hit the Xavier Magneto, you know, and maybe it's because, you know, knowing who Xavier is. You know, it's like he might have actually taken out. You know, it's like, you know, Xavier might have been like, okay, clock, and then just erase everybody's memories. You know?
Yeah,
might have just flicked you right in your frontal lobe a little bit.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, nobody remembers that. Yeah.
We have a great super chat here that I think will speak right to that. I'm very interested to hear your opinion on this, Damion. Adam Grunther said, "Do you think that there should have been more than 4 members on the team, the X-Men team, or do you believe that it was perfect amount for this movie?" Okay, so we have Wolverine, we have Storm, we have Cyclops, we have Jean Grey, but technically the X-Men are only those 3, and Wolverine joins them late.
Yeah.
So technically there are only 3 X-Men at the start of this movie. Damion, what do you feel about this? Did we need more X-Men, or did the movie have enough space? Because we've been talking a lot in this podcast about how Storm barely has anything to do. Toad has barely anything to do. Mystique has barely anything to do. Jean Grey. I worry that if you were to do a full, like, 7-member X-Men team, there wouldn't be enough space to set them all up. What do you feel about this?
The problem is they were creating relationships on the fly. So when you create relationships on the fly, you don't have time to really invest in the characters the way that you could if you were using more established relationships. You know, there was plenty of space for just the original X-Men. You know, you could have just. Why is my dog barking?
He agrees. He agrees.
Huh?
He agrees.
He's like, yeah, tell him. So it's. I don't think it was too few because they didn't, like you said, they underutilized some of the ones they had, let alone adding any more to it. So it was the shuffling of the relationships made it difficult to establish what the relationships were because they're trying to figure them out. So I can't say there should have been more, but I don't know that they were perfect because they underutilized the ones they had.
Yeah. I honestly, I kind of think the number is good, but I do think that we could have used one more. And because if you look at the thing that I really love about the X-Men is that there's always the weirdo characters, and the weirdo characters are usually like, you know, they're blue skin or red skin, and they're the ones that are usually examining like a metaphor or analogy to our times. And weirdly, I kind of think we're missing that in this movie, and I kind of wonder if it should have been Nightcrawler.
It should have been Wolverine.
Well,
it should have been Duke.
I'm gonna go dark horse and say it should have been Maggot. Ashley, what do you think? What is the numbers? More X-Men, less X-Men?
So for
more
the
women?
time, more women who can actually do anything? Yes. Who have any kind of autonomy? Yes. For the time, I understand how you as an executive, you as a writer are saying, I don't really think we can do more than 5. And you're adding Rogue into this mix, and you're establishing Eric and Charles. So that builds your cast out to being about 7. Now I think you can have just your core team being 7 people with Eric, with with a couple mentor figures. My choice is always the Claremont era X-Men because that's my favorite X-Men lineup. And I think it gives us a better, unless you're going to do what is called colorblind casting, which I'm totally open for. Anyone can be any race, any creed. It doesn't really matter at all, except with Storm. Storm kind of has to be African.
It's funny. I don't like colorblind casting.
Interesting.
Oh, okay. I would love to hear more on that.
It's because there's, as a fanboy, you want to see the character you grew up with on screen. Now, there's certain things you could do, small changes you could do. Like, for example, Peter Parker technically could just be multiracial. You know, if he was racially ambiguous, it wouldn't really kill the character.
No.
There's no reason that Iron Fist can't be biracial.
Agreed.
You know, and you know, and it's this weird thing of I want to see the character I saw. Like I said, if Peter Parker was tan, it wouldn't take away from, you know, watching Peter Parker on screen. You still could get that Peter Parker feel without it being too far away from what you saw when you were growing up. You know, making Iron Fist you know, light brown haired half Asian guy would not take away from it, and it actually adds to it because you can make his actual mother from, you know, you can do a whole lot of that with that, and it makes sense, and it makes it a lot less Tarzan-y. But you can there's some that I feel like I wouldn't mind so much, but in terms of, you know, like obviously you can't change a thing. Everyone blue-eyed thing, he's Jewish, he's well established, yada, you know, there's certain things, and so I understand why they do it, but I just want to see the characters I read about when I was growing up on screen. You know,
was this fair?
And there are so many characters of color that are underdeveloped that you could throw one in a movie, and it, you know what I mean, you could just put them in there and put them in the slots that they sort of fulfilled a little bit in the comic book when they came in, but didn't really get a chance to bloom in. Put them on screen and let them do it.
Yeah,
I'm holding out for Forge in live action.
Forge would be great.
Oh, so good.
I mean, I'm also the opinion that I really want more in the movies of Bishop than the small little cameo we got in Days of Future Past, because he's one of my favorite X-Men.
I also want Blink to come back.
Yes.
We have
another great super chat from good friend of the podcast, Jeremy Skinner, who said, "Hi, all you wonderful people. I'm late. So sorry if you discussed this, but of all the characters, who had the most disservice done to them?" Now,
Storm.
Yeah, I mean, we think we agree, Storm. But you, Damion, earlier were just talking, you think it's Magneto still?
No, not the greatest disservice.
Oh, okay.
His character was served. The relationship between him and Charles and the diametrically opposing stances and places that they took wasn't served by Ian McKellen, because he's much closer physically to Patrick Stewart than I feel like Magneto should have been. But actually, I'm going to go with Rogue.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
If you look at Rogue's original character, as opposed to what we saw on screen, incredible, because Rogue is the hottest Southern belle you can never touch. That's her whole thing.
I was also waiting for the reveal that she was Magneto's daughter the whole time. I was like,
right, yeah. And so you make her 16. You know, and you kill that entire aspect of it. The 16-year-old that can't touch anybody is one thing, but a grown woman who has to go, you know, she's a woman. She's fully developed. She's fully, you know what I mean? She's been living with this for a while. Diana Paquin is just coming into this. I don't know how to deal with the fact that I can't be touched. You know what I mean? She's kind of figuring it out, which is one thing. But you give it to a grown woman, because I actually think Rebecca Romijn Stamos would have made a better Rogue.
Oh, interesting. That she would have made a great Rogue.
I mean, I would have loved that.
Yeah, because then you you don't put her in that role. Maybe you put her where Storm was. You know, give her the Captain Marvel powers and don't explain it.
Sure, yeah.
You know?
She can fly. Why? Because we want her to.
Yeah, because she can do that. Something happened to her. She ran into somebody that had these abilities. She has them. So it's just, you know, like I said, they just massaged so many relationships in a way that didn't make any sense or serve later on, because those characters never got served in the relationship places that they put them in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go Rogue. Go ahead.
Nice.
Storm. No, go ahead.
That's all good. We have another super chat from Meow Neon, who says, if there's another cue they could have taken from the animated series, it's more Jean Grey and Professor X screaming after a psychic backlash. I think they should have, to be honest with you, I'll tell you this. I think they should have paid off the rights, whoever the heck made it, and somehow incorporated the X-Men animated theme song into the score of this movie. That should have, I mean, we all agree that is like the X-Men theme.
Oh, yeah.
So like we should have heard like whatever the big orchestrational movement of that, you know, like it'd have been violin, but like, you know,
on a cello, like in the Wonder Woman style, would have been amazing.
Yeah, or like,
on the violin, that would have killed.
Yeah, it would have been amazing.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah, like that's one of the things I think we should have taken from the animated movie. All right,
they really played down Jean's psychic abilities in terms of her. They really played her as a telekinetic more than a telepathic. So, you know, I could see some psychic backlash. It shouldn't have been as big as by any means of how Xavier handled it, but definitely I could see that there should have been some kind of okay, that doesn't feel good.
Well, that comes back to me again. For me, I feel that that's 20th Century Fox, an executive looking at that script, and in the original script, she's telepathic and she's telekinetic, and they're like, it's
awful powerful.
They're like, it's too confusing that two characters have telepathy. We only need one character telepathy.
Which is interesting because, and I know I keep bringing up X2, but the opening sequence in X2 after the Nightcrawler fight is Jean being overwhelmed in the museum and Professor X having to like freeze everyone. So it kind of answers that a couple years later when they were obviously reading all of our thoughts in the forums.
All right, so there is we've already taken it apart quite a bit. The end finale on Ellis Island or Freedom Island or Liberty Island? Liberty Island.
I know, I've never been there.
There is one.
They shot it in Hamilton, Ontario, folks. So I have been there.
There is one bit of it that I think does really work. And I wish that the rest of the sequence was as original and as innovative as the sequence. And that is when Mystique turns into Wolverine, and we're not quite certain which Wolverine is Wolverine.
You can see where her costume is folding around her harness in the screenshot that Jason has pulled up.
But this to me is the only part of the Liberty sequence, the adventure sequence of this, the climax of this movie, where they're thinking about these characters' powers and being like, how can we show the audience ways that they've never been used before? Ashley, you brought this up when we were watching the movie. Like, one of the best moments of this is when fake Wolverine puts up her claws and Wolverine chops right through them.
Yes.
Oh man! As a Canadian growing up, Wolverine was one of my favorite X people, and I love that moment. I love that moment to this day. Yeah. It's so cool. Also,
that's
because
frustrates me about this movie. There's so many nice moments like that.
And then the "you're a dick" moment, it's that's so perfectly. First of all, never heard a superhero say a bad word like that up to that point in my life. I didn't know that it was going to lead to the "fu" we would get in an X-Men movie down the line. And then also, that moment to me so perfectly encapsulates Scott and Logan's relationship. Mm-hmm. And the look that James gives after that, where he's just like, "All right, you got
Which
it."
would have been awesome if they had made them more equal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they did. They put James Marsden on Apple boxes.
No, they did. No, they did. Because if you look at that one scene when he grabs him, he's actually taller.
Yeah.
Yes.
They actually did put, but it's like they didn't give Marsden enough to be, to make that. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Well, that leads us into our next super chat, because David Skelton said, also late. Don't worry about it, David. You're here on time. What do you think of Cyclops in these films, who, of course, is always right? First off, David, you are correct. Cyclops is always right. Second, as a big Cyclops fan, I'm repping the Summers family here. Do you know who was originally cast as Cyclops and had to say no to the Jim Caviezel?
Wow.
What a weird choice, right?
Himself.
Yeah, Jesus Christ himself was going to be Cyclops.
Who was your Cyclops choice?
For me?
You could pick anybody, yeah.
Okay, if I could pick anybody, if I'm back in 2000, it is, God, I forgot his name. Help me out.
I don't know. I'm not psychic.
Raylan Givens from Justified.
Oh, Timothy Olyphant.
Timothy Olyphant is my Cyclops. Who I think he has enough power, Michael but he's also stringent. Yours is Michael Biehn?
Ooh.
That's a great choice as well. Ashley?
It's tough. It's tough for me to think about 2000. Mm-hmm. Also because I like the X-Men era now. So I like, in my head canon, Scott and Logan and Jean are the perfect throuple that will be together forever. And that's the best thing that Jonathan Hickman ever gave me in comics, is their relationship. I love it so much. But they're probably all in their 40s.
No, they are. Yeah.
So honestly, you could make it Timothy Olyphant right now, and I would still be down for that.
Sure.
I would be surprised if someone like Matthew Good wouldn't have been part of the conversation at the time, who later went on to be in the Watchmen movie.
Not a terrible choice.
I don't know.
I always think about,
I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, I always think about the slightly militant aspect of Cyclops, which is why I went with Biehn.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's got a very, because after Terminator, like where he was kind of like, I really feel like he had that earnestness and that just, that presence to kind of not necessarily get the shine, but still, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you, like, for example, Marsden in Westworld is who should have been Cyclops, not Marsden 20 years ago.
Yes,
If you look at Westworld, especially when he switched.
I agree. I agree.
Spoiler.
100. You are 100%, man. Like, yeah, Marsden now it would have been like perfection Cyclops.
He would have destroyed.
Yeah.
Because then, even with the little bit they gave him, he would have still looked at him and Hugh Jackman and been like, I don't know, you know.
Well, that's another problem with this movie is that, and this has been said in several interviews by the director, that the reason why they cast James Marsden was because they decided that, and I don't know why they made this choice, that they thought that it would be more interesting if Cyclops was younger than Wolverine.
And Jean Grey, yeah. And that Jean and Logan
are contemporaries.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Cyclops is always going to be younger than Wolverine because Wolverine's like 160 years old.
True.
Yeah, truly.
Fair point.
Which I actually, when I first saw this and Jean is like kind of telling her diagnosis on Logan, she's like, he could be older than you, Professor. Like little like preteen me was like, oh my God, yes, he's like 1,000 years old. This is so great.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I would say to answer more of David Skelton's film, I think James Marsden does all right with what he's given.
He's given nothing.
But Cyclops is so underutilized in all three of these movies. In fact, in the second movie, Professor X, where they write him out of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in every movie
he's underutilized in all the X-Men movies.
Yes. And he, to be honest with you, Cyclops should be the main character of these movies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Look, you don't have to pitch me on that, man. I could pitch a Scott Summers X-Men movie till the cows come home. All right, so before we get to everybody out there watching right now, I just want to say that if you want to send an excellent super chat like David Skelton, you can. We do have a Q&A session that'll be coming up very soon. But we got to wrap up this movie, Damion, and we got to talk about the ending here. What do you think about the climax of this movie that Rogue basically dies? And she lives because she sucks off the energy of Logan, which I actually think is kind of a neat beat. And then also, of course, the iconic scene between Magneto and Charles in the plastic prison, and a nice movie Easter egg created by Stark Technologies, Stark Industries, if you look for it. It's in there. It's in the movie that is basically copied by every X-Men every X-Men movie going forward basically has an end scene between Magneto and Charles somehow playing chess. But Damion, what do you feel about the climax to this movie?
I like that Rogue stole Wolverine's powers. I didn't like that his wounds reopened because they had healed.
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that's how medicine works, though.
I'm like, I understand that they wanted to show that it was a big thing, but I'm like, he healed those, and okay. But a nice effective way to kind of save Rogue and put Wolverine out of commission yet again. Mm-hmm. And also, but the Charles and they are so good together. That's one of the things that always conflicts my heart. Mm-hmm. Is the two of them against each other are so good. It's so good to see them go head to head. Mm-hmm. And it's so it was very nice. I quite enjoyed it. And it's like, oh man, Magneto's about to get rough. It's like that was his, because we got to think about it. That was his nice solution.
Yeah.
That was his. This is my kinder, gentler solution for how I'm going to fix the mutant problem. Now you lock me up. Okay. So it's like,
now I'm going to be me.
I wonder what he's going to do. So I actually did like that quite a bit.
All right. So when we wrap up every one of these summer movies, we always ask the same few questions at the end of it. And I'm going to start with you, Ashley.
Yes.
Who is, in your opinion, the best actor in this movie? Who gives the best performance in this movie?
I am going to give this to Sir Patrick Stewart because he holds down both on screen and in voiceover a lot of exposition. He is the one explaining this world to us and to an audience that they assume knows nothing about it. Mm-hmm. The fact that opening monologue is in any way comprehensible is a feat. It's something that I respect a lot about what Cate Blanchett has to do as Galadriel in the beginning of the Lord of the Rings movie. And I mean, he's one of the greats of our time. And even though he does get to sleep through the last act of the movie
and still get paid.
Truly, what a dream. He is iconic He's amazing. There's a reason that we go on to adopt his RP accent for all performances going forward of this character. And I think he is closer to the comic book character than my gay boyfriend Ian McKellen is to Magneto. So that's why I'm picking him instead of Gandalf. I'm sorry.
Ashley, if you ask me who the best actor in this movie is, I think I have to agree with you. It is.
Woo!
It is. Patrick Stewart grounds this movie in a lot, and ambiance is not the term, but he sort of elevates this material way higher than it does, and you can see, and it's what Damion was saying before. Like Ian McKellen matches him. And so like they both elevate all of their scenes way higher than they should be. Which I think is quite of a big strength of this movie. Damion.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say he's also funny.
Oh yes. Damion.
3 for 3.
What
3 for 3.
Yeah. 3 for 3. We're going Patrick Stewart here. Oh, let's give Patrick another appearance on screen here.
Yeah. Stewart killed it. He is the heart of this movie.
He's so handsome in that headshot too.
Without him doing what he did, is he grounded every character. He was the through line for every. Think about it. He's the through line for every single character, Magneto included.
And he doesn't wipe Wolverine's memory when he calls him Wheels, which is really something. That's one of my favorite scenes in X2 is where he's like, put that out because Wolverine is smoking. Or I'll have you spend the rest of your life thinking you're a 6-year-old girl.
All right, Damion, I want to ask you this question. This movie came out in 2000, July of 2000. It's 20 years old. Does this movie hold up to 2020 standards?
No. If you take X-Men off of it and rename all the characters and just do some crazy powered movie about these disparate groups of mutant fighting, I'd probably be okay with it. But putting it under X-Men, seeing what they've done, seeing what happens when you actually respect the source material, which I don't think the X-Men ever have to this day. No.
Actually, does X-Men 2000 hold up?
That's an interesting question because before we rewatched it yesterday, I would have said, yeah, this movie holds up pretty well. I think X2 is better. It's got Nightcrawler in it. But watching this yesterday, this movie is 2000s as hell. In good ways and in bad ways. Now, I will continue to keep watching this movie because it brings me enough joy, and I have a lot of nostalgia for where I was in my life when I saw this movie, along with the second one. But I don't think this holds up by a modern standard. And I think especially post MCU, post Dark Knight trilogy, I think if you don't get it at the right time in your life where you're young enough to not be bothered or hung up on effects or performance or things like that, or if you don't have love for this movie already, I don't know if it translates. And part of that is 20 years. The other two movies that we talked about on Summer Movie Club were more recent than this. So maybe in 5 years or in 10 years, we won't think that they hold up either. But
fair.
I like this movie, but it was definitely made in 1999.
Enjoyable watch. Very enjoyable watch.
Yeah.
All right, Jason.
I'm in the middle. I think this 50% holds up, and I think 50% of it, yes, it is very 2000s. Again, like this is the classic superhero. This is the classic 90s trope of it has to be like a bomb in the end. And it kind of like deflates the entire movie because they're building towards Magneto's machine. But I would say the things that make this not hold up is actually because of its budget, because this movie was made for $75 million.
Which is insane.
Which at the time, even in 2000, was a low budget for a movie of this size. And the fact that this movie was able to show these powers and a team with that budget is a miracle.
I think what sustains this movie is the cast.
Yes.
Because the casting that's good,
certain members of the cast
with good writing, because there are some great actors who have very bad writing.
Yes.
Really, really works. Like there is a reason that Magneto, Professor X, and Wolverine are in every X-Men movie going forward.
Yes.
And it's because of the incredible casting decisions.
All right. So if you guys are interested in more X-Men stuff, of course, don't forget you can go over to our website. Ashley, where can they find our recommended reading?
Geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading. You go over there, you click on the little widgets, you buy what we recommend, and you steal money from Jeff Bezos and you give it to us instead.
That's correct. So we'll have this movie and a bunch of rather X-Men stories of ours that we think are favorites or were inspired by this movie or hold up this movie, and you can go check that out. But we're going to go into the Q&A section, the discussion section. We have a bunch of questions here from the chat, including this really nice one, KT83976, who says, I'll always remember 6-year-old me running to buy X-Men comics after seeing this opening weekend. And I'll tell you what, no matter what we think of any of these movies or any of the movies we talk about, if this movie inspires you to read comic books, that is amazing.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful memory.
That is really. We have David Coco. I'm sorry. I apologize. I won't say Coco. I apologize, David. I apologize. David, the Supreme Master. As I'm going to call it, yes. David C., who says, do you think Disney will redeem the sideline characters, Storm, Cyclops, etc.? How do you think the X-Men will be introduced in the MCU, and what is your ideal team lineup? Now, this is a question, Damion.
The whole podcast in and of itself.
Oh, that is.
Truly.
They're
trying to get Damion to break any NDAs he might have right now. That's what they're hoping, that you are in an X-Men movie.
we've been asked this question like several times, and when I answer this question, I always say what your answer is, Damion. Is I say if the MCU wants to be different, they will leave Wolverine out of the movie, and this will be the first X-Men movie that starts with the original 5.
Mm-hmm. I also want to say that I do think, I think Storm has had a redemption. I think Alexandra Shipp is a really good Storm.
Oh, that's fair.
She's the new younger Storm. I just hope that they let her speak more, because Storm is always relegated to the least amount of lines, and that's always really disappointing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the power of bringing in the original 5 is the whole thing of they all look. Especially when they first came in, they all look like quote unquote normal folks.
Yes,
they all have special powers. Is one of the strengths of it. But I don't know that you can do that in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fair point.
I don't know that you can do the 5 white people who are doing who are talking about being oppressed. That's it. I
agree. That's why I would offer the pitch. But I know you're an X-Men purist. Is that I would do the original 5, but I would put Storm in there.
Make Scott black.
That too. Why not? Make any of them black.
There's nothing inherently in his character that has to be, Beast. You can't do Beast because he's going to turn blue.
Mm.
I would love though if they did, which they teased and then they undid it, because goddamn everyone's got to be in love with Jean Grey, which I hate that trope, but Beast is gay. Beast came out during the Grant Morrison run, and then they shoved that back in the closet to make him in love with 16-year-old Jean Grey, which is icky for so many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think putting a pansexual or a bisexual or a queer person on the X-Men as one of your core 5 or 6 team members, I think would be really amazing. And he's going to turn blue anyway.
It's a tricky one, because like you said, you want to see the original 5, especially in the Marvel universe, but then you got to look at it through the 2020 plus lens and say, how do we make that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, so it gets a little tricky. I think you make Scott either biracial or something else. Jean's she's a redhead. She kind of that's kind of limiting. Bobby, when he uses his powers, is he becomes clear. So and Beast is going to turn blue. So those 2 characters, you could make either of them, LGBTQ. What are the other letters?
IA.
You could. And young Bobby's still gay.
One timeline, Bobby's gay. In the other one, Bobby's a womanizer. So they kind of went
right.
I'd be fine if they decided that in the MCU we were like Bobby was our little Twinkie Iceman. That'd be fine.
So there's some different ways you could play it, but it gets tricky. But I think one of the things I love about, and they're not doing it enough, is especially if you make Scott Summers multiracial,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden he's dealing with two cultures anyway. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So he's already got that conflict of where do I belong, and then you throw in the fact that he's a mutant.
Damion, you're so smart.
It's like you work in Hollywood.
But you really push up that level of where do I fit in this society? Because the whole thing about X-Men is you want to fit and you kind of fit, but you don't fit for the ones that look human. So being biracial, he wants to fit, he kind of fits, but he doesn't fit because he's biracial.
I like that. We also have
completely just all that in a yeah.
Oh, sorry. We sort of the streams made us cross it. Go ahead and finish your point, Damion. I'm sorry.
Okay, that was pretty much it, though. I was just trying to think of how you would do that, but I would definitely go with the original 5. And if you made Scott biracial, you wouldn't necessarily need to bring in Storm immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And for God's sake, make Jean Grey more powerful.
Yes.
Also, make Storm older. Make Storm a teacher or an African queen. Make her older.
I think, or just bring in the second team of X-Men and have the other X-Men disappear like they were.
Great.
Oh, the all new X-Men are the team.
Move straight to all new. Yeah. Move straight to all new.
I'm down with that. Adam Grinther has a question here: do you think that this movie franchise, the X-Men franchise, would have worked as well as it did without Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen? Ashley, what do you feel?
Yes and no. They're so perfect in those parts, so it's really hard to try and imagine a world without. But they're not the only 3 great actors who exist or who were working at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a moment of multiverse theory where I would love to know what other actors really made this pop.
Doug Ray Scott supposed to be Wolverine originally?
Doug Ray Scott was originally supposed to be Wolverine, but what happened is that he was filming Mission Impossible 2 at the time with John Woo and Tom Cruise. They went over schedule, so he couldn't make it to X-Men filming time, so they went with the runner-up, Hugh Jackman.
Leopold of Kate and Leopold fame.
Hugh Jackman has never thanked the gods or the scheduling of John Woo more so than it changed his entire life.
Look, there's a version where X-Men gets made in the 60s or 70s, and Clint Eastwood is the most iconic Wolverine of all time. And that's a timeline I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I'm into it.
He's too tall.
I'm going to call it right now. When they call you to play Wolverine, you can't talk about how tall he is anymore.
Look,
I'm insane. That doesn't work at all.
I'm fine with the Clint Eastwood Wolverine. I'm fine with the Clint Eastwood Wolverine if we get a Yul Brynner Professor Xavier.
Great. Sure.
All right, our final question here comes from Dylan Hernandez, who says, coming from someone born after the movie came out, Dylan, you just gave your age away, currently 16.
He says how old he is.
How do you think this movie represents the younger characters, love you guys loads, and appreciate what you do? So I assume Dylan is referring to like Bobby Drake and some of the, we see like a glimpse of Kitty Pryde.
John, you see one of 800 Kitty Prydes, you see a glance of Jubilee, and then Rogue, obviously.
Damion, what do you feel? How do you feel this movie represents the younger X-Men?
I mean, the cameos were cool. They wrecked Rogue. It should have been Jubilee or somebody else. I didn't like that at all. But I feel like they didn't really do much with them. I feel like they kind of were like, hey, these guys could maybe do something later. And then, so they weren't really represented. And the Bobby Rogue thing was almost interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't love them as a couple or where their relationship really goes.
Mm-hmm.
But you make such an excellent point of like, there's kind of nothing for them to do. Like their set dressing for a couple of people, I'm sure it was a nice career boost. I would have loved to have been an X-Men in 2000, but this movie was not interested in exploring that. And that's, again, to me, that's such an executive note of we can't do this movie led by teens. It has to be, we have our former Bond girl, we have our Oscar winner. Like they tried to make it prestige by casting older.
If I'm correct, and I could be wrong on this, I believe this movie is the one that changed the comic books, because after this, the comic books update themselves to where they're like, oh no, the mansion is full of like high school age kids and the X-Men are the teachers. Whereas before that, it was always that the X-Men were the students and they were the only ones that lived in the house.
Well, Marvel Comics has always been, and DC does it too, but Marvel Comics has always been very guilty of if it hits in the movies, that's the new normal for the comic books. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I know I said that was the final question, but we have a great question here that I would love to hear your thoughts on, Damion. Supersonic Hero 10 says, notwithstanding your opinions of these, what do you think of the Marvel films of that time? But I want to talk about their second question. Which held the most impact on comic book films overall, after and now? Of these three, X-Men, Blade, or the first Spider-Man? Damion, which one do you think impacts Marvel films going forward of those three?
Spider-Man.
Why, good sir?
Spider-Man was the closest to actual comic. Blade was amazing, but Blade's not a daywalker. Blade is a guy who has a few vampiric-like powers that hunts vampires. So the Daywalker thing was not at all in Blade previous to this movie. And it's one of the reasons why I'm like, that was a great movie, but it wasn't a Blade movie.
Well, he's an Avenger now. So
he won't be an Avenger.
He was an incredible Daywalker. Wasn't Blade.
Ashley, go ahead.
X-Men, we already talked about how much X-Men diverged from anything recognizable as the X-Men. and then but Spider-Man, aside from the poor choice of an exoskeleton, did a really good job of actually, having a lot of Spider-Man-y things. The costume was Spider-Man-y. His life was Spider-Man-y. Toby was a little old.
He did start the trend of 35-year-olds playing Spider-Man.
Right, yeah. But yeah, it was. But they actually it felt the closest to a Marvel movie production to me.
Ashley, what are those three, do you feel?
It's hard not to give it to Spider-Man, and part of that is because of the impact and the popularity that the character already had coming into having a movie. But I would give it to Spider-Man simply for the fact that Spider-Man is the only one currently at the time of this recording, hello future people, that has been fully integrated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We know the other two are coming. Blade is coming before X-Men is. We have a casting choice that I'm truly so thrilled about in Mahershala Ali, who's wonderful and should just play everyone in the Marvel Universe at this point, because I think this is his fourth stint. But I just think if you look at it from sort of a industry macrocosmic lens, I think it has to be Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, I think
I mean for the meme value alone.
No, the Blade is a great movie, but it's just an action movie. X-Men I think showed you that you could do a team superhero movie, but Spider-Man pushes the whole genre forward because one, it showed you, you could literally duplicate the costume and it'll work. Two, you could literally duplicate some of the storylines, it'll work. But the one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize about Spider-Man is that the reason why James Cameron's Spider-Man never happened in the 90s is because they couldn't make the web slinging work.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man 2002, with a mixture of CGI and real, I think was the first comic movie that was like, oh yeah, superhero powers, we can do them on the big budget screen now.
Nice.
And they look legit. I mean, the Spider-Man, if you go back and look at Spider-Man 2002, most of the CGI, like there's sometimes he gets pretty rubbery, but like I would say about 75% of those special effects still hold up. They like the web swinging just looks great.
I just think all three of us agreeing on Spider-Man speaks to the cultural impact of Nickelback on the comic book industry. Thank you to my countrymen for their contribution.
And I think that's a great way to end the podcast.
Yeah.
Once Nickelback is mentioned, I think that's a great way to end. Damion, thank you so much for your conversation. Thank you so much for your opinions. Please tell our fans and our watchers that are watching us live right now where they can find you on the internet. And if you have any new projects coming up, I know we're in COVID times where everything's shut down, but is there anything out there that they can watch of yours and they can just be impressed of your glow?
I'm at Damion Poitier everywhere. Spelling just like it is there on the screen.
Right there.
That's me everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, though I never go on Reddit. Actually Tumblr, though I rarely post on Tumblr. I'm on it all. Facebook, that's all. It's all Damion Poitier. And in terms of where you can see me, Flash seasons, the last season of Flash just went up on
Netflix, and you're in it.
And I'm in that one. And I'm also in the previous season. And anything coming out, I don't know that there's anything I can talk about.
Fair.
Schedules have been switched around and moved and I don't know what they're doing. So I'm going to not say anything I shouldn't say.
So somewhere in the multiverse we can find you. Got it. By the way, I want to just tell you we have some friends that have worked on the Flash television show, and we have pitched you to them. We're like, why isn't Goldface a season-long villain? You got Damien's a cool dude. You want him on set. Just keep him there.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're great crew. Great writers, like the whole Flash was great. They were all awesome.
Well, I think you're one of their best rogues, so kudos to you.
Look, there's the reason they brought him back, obviously.
Don't forget, everybody out there, you can follow this podcast on Twitter and Facebook. Ashley, where are the best places that they can find that?
You can find us at geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or on Twitter at GHL Podcast. If you want to request an episode, please do it on Twitter and tell us what Damion should return.
That's right.
For.
Don't forget to follow Ashley on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V. Robinson. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Jawiin. That's Jawiin. I want to give our eternal thanks again to our amazing guest, the first Thanos and my favorite Flash rogue, Damion. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
I love this because, like,
the last time we tried to have Damion, he was shooting Flash.
That's right.
And then here's a Meet Cute 2.0. We met Damion when Jason and I used to work for comicbook.com on the red carpet for Captain America's Civil War, and then kept running into each other at comic book conventions.
That's right.
And it's still, there's part of my brain that's still kind of wild that we're friends.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say that this should be a lesson to everybody out there that Damion, as well, being the dissenting opinion of this movie, but we still had a great conversation. So that just should show you, everybody out there, that no nerd opinion is wrong.
Yeah. And you can also come and articulate and not scream the whole time. I mean, we screamed a lot.
Yeah.
And we'll all still leave friends.
But there was enthusiasm and excitement, not anger.
Exactly.
That's right. All right. Well, we've taken too much of your time. Thank you, everybody, for watching this Geek History Lesson and listening to this Geek History Lesson in the future. I am Jason. Still might have a mutation in them.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
Thank you again, Damion. And thank you all to watching. Goodbye. And class is dismissed, everybody.
Bye.